Hey guys, you know, it's kind of, it's kind of funny. Anytime a show comes out, anytime a new show comes out, whether it's something that's a reboot of something nostalgic or not, that a lot of fans that maybe grew up on the original might be very doubtful about it at first because it's like, seriously, this is what you're going to give us. This is what you're going to give us as a reboot, as a retooling, as a retcon, if you will. This is what you're going to give us. And yet when we first kind of decide, okay, we'll see what this is about, and it's probably not going to be as good, probably a dumb reincarnation, whatever. And yet, when we finally give it a first glance, we start going and we start getting this feeling of, maybe this isn't as bad as we thought. Maybe this isn't as bad as we thought. Let's give it another chance. And then the following week, we watch another episode, and we start to like it even more. And then over time, as we watch more and more, we start to realize that, hey, this actually is a pretty good show. And it feels like it's something from the past, but yet it's been released this decade, this century. Or at least this decade. And that's the feeling that Friendship is Magic gives older fans like myself and Silver Quill and Lightning Bliss. Those that grew up in the 80s and maybe even the 70s, like Dusty Cat. It gives fans like Dill Wilsonator, Josh Scorcher, and a few others that grew up in the 90s and the early 2000s. It gives us that feeling that this is the kind of show that you could actually watch, and enjoy in the past. That would fit in perfectly with that time frame. And it's not just because it gives us references to pop culture of the past and the present. I mean, heck, the recent episode, Granny's Gone Wild, did a freaking pop culture reference, a more recent one, to Rick and Morty, by putting a pornified version of the two in the show as a cameo. And that's not a lie either. But it's stuff like that even today's generation would be like, hey, that's pretty cool of them to do. But when one looks at Friendship is Magic as a whole, and if one has been a fan of it for as long as they have been, and believe me, I've come out here and have said that, and pointed out and basically admitted I've not been a fan as long as a lot of people have. I mean, heck, I did a video that you can find here on my channel where I said I wasn't a brony, and yet look now. Look how much has changed. And there's a lot of people that feel the same way. A lot of people feel that same way. A lot of people have felt that same way in the past, I should say. A lot of people have felt when they were first told, hey, give this show a chance, you might be surprised. A lot of them felt the same way. A lot of them would come out and say, I'm not a Brody, I'm not a Pegasus, I'm not really a fan. But yet, over time, they slowly start to become it. And, lo and behold, in the past several years, I say since, since season 4, 5 maybe, I started to slowly get into it. I mean, I started to gain some interest a little bit at the end of season 2 into season 3, just a bit. Just not much, because also I think I was starting to, I just wasn't really into it as much. But I slowly started to get into it, slowly started to take notice. And then, like I said, over the past several years, boom, something just started to click. And it's not because, I became a fan of certain characters like Rarity and Luna. It's not because of that, not because those people would point them out as the eye candy of the show. No, it's not because of that either. I mean, I'm sure that's how a lot of young men my age, older, younger, probably got into the show, but it's also because they got great characters to them. They had great character development put into them, and you find out there is more to those characters than what you see initially. And I think the other thing that got me into it as well is you see this character like Spike having this crush and affection for Rarity, and you're like, why don't you just... And then you get an episode in season 2, which I actually, I didn't see fully, but I actually would skim through and see certain parts and be like, okay, if Lauren Faust, who was in charge, still working on the show at that time, if she's willing to do this, then why didn't you follow through all the way? And there are times throughout the rest of the show, the rest of the seasons that followed, that they kind of followed through. They still kind of hinted at it, even to the more recent episodes coming up. Like in a couple of weeks, we got an episode that pretty much has been previewed by Discovery Family, where you're going to have Rarity involved with Spike. And of course, you throw in Twilight and Zecora, but still, you get the idea. But still, you get the idea. It's like, if you're going to go as far as still talk about it, tease it, pay attention to it, then why not follow through? That's my thing. And I'm sure I'm not the only one that feels that way. But besides that being one of the things that got me into it, I started seeing exactly what a lot of people were saying. That these were great characters. There was more to these characters than what was being let on. There was more personality to them, more character development. The series had great world building at times. I mean, it just had stuff that you wouldn't think a show like that would have, and yet here it was, right in front of you. And this is the kind of stuff that you would expect in a show that would take place in the past generations, like the mid to late 80s, the early to mid 90s, the early 2000s. That's the kind of stuff you would expect there. Not in a show like MLP, but yet here you are. And that's why people like me have become fans. Older people like me have become fans. Because there's that nostalgicness. There's a nostalgicness that this show gives you when it goes in these directions, when it does the whole Spike Rarity deal, when it does the world expanding, when it does the character development, and just the overall atmosphere and environment, that it radiates, if you will, feels like something from the past, feels like a show that would fit in perfectly in the 80s, 90s, the mid to late 80s, maybe a bit of the early 90s, but mostly the mid to late 80s, the early to mid 90s, the early 2000s. It feels like it would fit in there. It feels like it would fit in one of those eras and generations perfectly. And that's why I think you have the fan base the way you have. And that's why this fan base consists of several age groups and generations. Especially of those that grew up in the 80s and the 90s. Because it feels like a show that belongs in that era. Because it feels like it's a show that belongs in those time frames. And being old school, this is why, in my opinion, I'm doing something that I used to do back in the what I'm trying to say, this is why, being someone that grew up at that time, I'm doing something that I used to do back in the 80s, in the 90s, and somewhat in the 2000s when I had a DVD, when I started buying DVD recorders when they started to come around. But even before that with VHS, this is why I've decided that this year I'm going to dedicate some time to DVR, and then later on use that DVR recording to record onto DVD, courtesy of my DVD recorder. And this is something that a lot of people that grew up in the 80s, in the 90s, in the early 2000s would do with VCRs and even when they first started to come out, DVD recorders as such. You know, we would dedicate a whole 6-hour tape, to recording every episode of our favorite show. So that way we could go, so that way when the show would go off the air for the season or would start going into reruns, or even if, let's say, it's the last season and we still want to have some kind of remnants of the show, we'd be able to pop in the VHS tape or pop in the DVD and be able to watch it. I mean, why do you think people on iOffer, like places like iOffer and eBay and stuff, are selling series discs of things like Pink Panther and Sons, of Kid Video and all that? Because these are the kind of shows that right now, through some legal situations, maybe copyright situations, will not get full official releases onto DVD. So what better way to probably have that series than to have it on DVD, courtesy of someone that originally recorded it on VHS. That's the one thing a lot of people like me and Silver Quill and Lightning Bliss and all of them that grew up in these past decades, love to do. We love to take recordable VHS tapes or recordable DVDs and use them to record the episodes of a series of that season, so that when it goes into reruns, at least we'll have a DVD or VHS copy. You know? And that's what I'm doing. I'm doing what's known as kind of an old school kind of deal. Yeah, we have DVR and all that, but let's all be honest. If you live with family, you know that sooner or later, family will accidentally erase or remove your program that you record. They will do that. Heck, there was a freaking commercial that Xfinity did a couple years ago. When the pony craze started to really come in, but they were still trying to focus on the young girls, on the little girls, which the show was originally intended for, as many people would say. They had a commercial where a little girl got upset at the fact that her mom had erased her recording of her pony show. It wasn't My Little Pony, but it was a parody name of the but basically the parody name was alluding to My Little Pony. But you get the idea. They had a commercial Xfinity did, and it's like, do you really want to deal with that? Do you really want to deal with that, right? Do you really want to deal with that? No, you don't. So that's why what I'm doing is I'm DVRing the episodes, and then when I get the opportunity, I record them onto DVD and then go from there. So that way, if my mom wants to take the episode off, fine, go ahead. Go ahead and do that so you can make room for your programs, that's fine. But I like to at least get an opportunity to DVR something so that if it's recordable, I can put it onto DVD. And that's what I'm doing. That's my goal. Now, I know some people would say, well, why don't you just wait till they all come onto Daily Motion or something, download them, and then put them onto a DVD courtesy of a DVD maker. I could do that, but the problem with a lot of DVD makers, well, at least the one I'm using, it will only give you about 150 minutes, which is 2 hours and 30 minutes. Now that's eligible, yes, but that's about 5 episodes at most. So, and that's 5 episodes at most. So in my opinion, you could go that route if you want to, but what I'm doing is going old school by saying, hey, I'm going to use 6 hours like I've grown accustomed to doing throughout my entire life from recording something onto VHS or DVD, and get as many episodes as I can. And in this case, about 12 episodes when you add in commercials. You don't add in commercials, you probably have about room for at least maybe 15. So possibly 12 to 14 episodes or 12 to 13 episodes I'm going to be able to put onto one 6-hour disc. That's about it. But that's why when I look at Friendship is Magic, when I think about it now, it has that nostalgic feel, that nostalgic atmosphere that makes it feel like it could be shown in a different time frame, a different time and a different time frame, a different era, a different generation, like the 80s and the 90s and early 2000s, and it would fit in perfectly there and maybe just be as much of a success there as it is now. And I think that's why a lot of older fans like myself, Silver Quill, Lightning Bliss, that grew up, Dusty Cat, that grew up in the 80s, people that grew up in the 90s like Dil Wassenator, A&I, or A&Y I should say, sorry about that, A&Y, Josh Scorcher, Firebrand, Aramau, or Ari, if you will. That probably grew up in the late 90s, early 2000s. I think, in my honest opinion, it's not just because of the great character development, the great storytelling, and the world expanding. I think it's because it's got that nostalgic feel that you can't get anywhere else from any kind of show, because it feels like it could belong in any kind of time frame. It really does. And that's why I've decided that this season, and hopefully next season, I'm going to dedicate using 1, 2, maybe 3 DVDs to record the season. I'm going to DVR the episodes when they come out, record the season, record them onto DVD later on when I get the opportunity, and go from there. So, that's basically my plan. And I do plan, unless they make an announcement soon about Season 7 onto DVD, my plan later on, maybe this upcoming week, is to put Season 7 onto DVD by going to the Netflix app on Xfinity and recording the episodes if I can. And I think I can. Because I recorded a Christmas movie, I think Christmas Time Is Here or something like that. I was able to record that, so hopefully I'll be able to do the same here. But that's my plans basically as far as My Little Pony goes for this season, next season, and as far as Season 7 goes on Netflix, to try to get them onto DVD. But we'll just have to wait till then. But I'm just going to have to wait until I get the opportunity on Season 7, and of course wait until Season 9 comes around. Right now my main focus is Season 8, and again, like I said, the reason is because it just gives me, like I'm sure a lot of the older fans who grew up in the time frame I did, it gives us that nostalgic feel, like it could be, like it's a show that could belong in any, that could be shown in any of those time frames and still be a success as it is now. So that's just it's just my thoughts on My Little Pony and how I get a nostalgic feel out of it and what I'm doing in response to that. So let me know what you guys think down below. Comment if you like. Sorry if I sounded like I rambled, and I'll talk to y'all later. Rambled and repeated myself, and I'll talk to y'all later.